Battle cries on both sides of the Atlantic tonight to stand up for what matters here in Brexited Europe and to find out what's the matter in Trump's America. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin, inside the Russian fog tonight. This is the day.
And the Russian government did never try to influence the outcome of the US presidential election, and there will be no evidence found.
Once, when Reagan was discussing taxes, I believe it was, addressing the British, he said, "Read my lips."
No. I will not prejudge the outcome of our investigation. We are seeking to determine if there is an actual fire, but there's clearly a lot of smoke.
I believe that Russian intelligence services and their proxies intervened in our election in 2016.
There is no alternative to a united and sovereign Europe.
Otherwise, the populists will run faster, and that will be bad for Europe. We must not be afraid of calling ourselves Christians, because that is our history.
We are Christian. I am proud to be Christian.
Also coming up tonight, all over the world, the number of new HIV infections is declining, except in Russia. A report from St. Petersburg on an epidemic and its faces outsiders are not supposed to see. That's coming up in about 17 minutes. We begin the day with the Russian scandal that refuses to be exorcised from the body politic led by Donald Trump. And this is more and more a bipartisan seance that the world is witnessing. Republicans and Democrats both are now calling on the head of the House Intelligence Committee to step aside, saying it's impossible for the Republican Representative Devin Nunes to lead an impartial investigation into alleged Russian rigging of the U.S. election. Now, Nunes was part of Trump's transition team, but it's his refusal to share information with the committee that has the New York Times tonight calling him dangerous. And in the U.S. Senate today, the same topic, a different committee. Now, hearings began on the power of Russian technology to manipulate elections. Here's some of what was said.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin ordered a deliberate campaign carefully constructed to undermine our election. First, Russia struck at our political institutions by electronically breaking into the headquarters of one of our political parties and stealing vast amounts of information.
The Kremlin can do this to the world's sole remaining global superpower. Imagine how other countries see it. The differences between Russia and the United States are profound and will not be resolved soon. This is not a crisis, not something that will pass soon. It is the new normal. We will see Russia relying on this toolkit in the months and years to come, in the upcoming elections in France and in Germany this year, in our own future political campaigns. Deception and active measures have long been and will remain a staple of Russia's dealings with the outside world for the foreseeable future.
Well, I'm joined now at the big table by John Kornblum. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Germany. John, it's good to have you.
Nice to be here.
Back on the show. Let me ask you about Mr. Nunes. The New York Times reporting that he is a danger to the United States. Can the House Intelligence Committee, can they just forget about trying to do any type of investigation?
Well, he's a danger, I suppose, if he's the head of the committee, but didn't we just see that he has stepped down? So I don't think he's a danger at all.
They're calling for him to recuse himself.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I don't like all these titles where somebody's a danger and there's a catastrophe. These things are made up of dozens of people. I would say, however, that the House of Representatives and its committee have more or less lost any credibility that they may have had, that they could do a serious investigation of this. And so that means that either the Senate's going to take it over or there will someday be an independent prosecutor.
An independent special prosecutor.
Right.
And what would that mean for the U.S. president if we were to get to that level?
Well, it would be first a big defeat for him. Secondly, we don't know what it means. It depends what the special prosecutor would find, if anything. These things are, in the United States, there are very clear laws, and these things are done very carefully. And so they don't necessarily mean that someone's guilty if you have a special prosecutor. On the other hand, as we saw with Bill Clinton, whose crimes were of a much less strategic issue than these, that the special prosecutor dogged him for 2 or 3 years, and it made his life really unpleasant.
In the U.S. Senate today, there were some very strong words about Russia's ability to manipulate the U.S. election, possibly the French, the German elections. Is it much more powerful? Are we just beginning to realize that it's much more influential and powerful than we ever imagined?
Well, it's not that powerful. Actually, it's quite a weak country. But the Russians, the communists, the Soviets, however you want to call them, from the very beginning believed that agitation, propaganda, active measures, lies, whatever you want to call them, were a tool that a weak country needs to use against stronger countries. And so it's not just, we shouldn't believe that this is just now because there are all these new cyber tools. The Russians have been doing this for a couple hundred years. And in much of my career, which was before there was an internet or anything like that, we fought continuously against Russian active measures. It's not new at all.
It's not new. And should there be a new level of concern or worry?
Well, it seems that the Russians have developed lots of methods now using modern tools to do this. I think we should be worried about it. We were very worried about it. Even going back to the 1950s, we were worried about it. So yes, it is worrisome, but it is not as if there is somehow a brand new situation in the world. This is something which the Russians have been doing time immemorial.
I'd like to move to another flashpoint geopolitically, and that is Turkey.
Yes.
The United States and Turkey are split over how to defeat so-called Islamic State. It is perhaps the biggest challenge so far for the new U.S. Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. Take a look.
Rex Tillerson and Mevlut Çavuşoğlu meet at a time when relations between the two NATO allies could be better. Still, the U.S.'s top diplomat insisted on highlighting the importance of the relationship, describing Turkey as a trusted ally and thanking Ankara for its efforts in the fight against the so-called Islamic State.
Turkish troops have permanently pushed ISIS off the Turkey-Syria border, and the United States is grateful for Turkey's important contributions as a member of the counter-ISIS coalition.
But Ankara wants more than words from Washington. The two countries are at odds over U.S. backing of Kurdish fighters in Syria. Turkey views the Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Units, YPG, as a terror group.
The US government accepts that there is no difference between the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia and the PKK. The PKK is on the list of terrorist groups, but unfortunately, we witnessed a collaboration of the US with the YPG in Syria in the past. We also saw that the previous government of the US supported the YPG. That support worried us. It has affected our relations negatively.
The policy of supporting YPG began during the old Obama administration. But new President Donald Trump hasn't given any indication he intends to change it.
Working together to defeat
Seeking to establish common ground, Tillerson is suggesting so-called safe zones in Syria. It's hoped that Syrians who fled their country could be returned to these safe havens. This would be a big relief to Turkey, which hosts more Syrian refugees than all other countries combined.
All right, we're back here now at the big table with John Kornblum. John, would you say that Turkey is suddenly one of the biggest problems for U.S. foreign policy when we consider the situation with NATO, the Fethullah Gulen, and the upcoming referendum in the country?
Well, Turkey's become a problem, there's no question about it, and it's partially because I think the West had neglected Turkey, partially because of Turkey's fear of its neighborhood that it's in. I think that I don't have a great understanding of where Erdogan is coming from, but I think part of it is he's worried about the spread of Muslim radicalism in Turkey, so he's trying to head it off, shall we say. So Turkey's a very big issue, but it's a very big issue for Europe, too. It's a very big issue for the whole West.
And Fethullah Gulen, he has not been extradited.
No,
to Turkey.
Probably won't be.
And there is some chatter, diplomatic chatter, that he could become a pawn here for this White House in dealing with Erdogan. Do you see that happening?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. That's very difficult. He claims he's totally innocent. He's in the United States legally. I think it would be very hard for the United States to extradite him. I think it would be politically almost impossible for the president to do so.
And in terms of NATO and Turkey's place in the alliance?
I don't think that's in danger, to tell you the truth. I think Turkey understands how important NATO is to it. And I think that the West understands how important Turkey is to NATO. I don't think NATO as such is, I don't actually think there's much fundamental danger. There's just lots and lots of conflict at the moment, which keeps us from doing other things like Syria, for example.
Yeah. Let me turn your attention now to Brexit. Brexit has been triggered. The European Union is going to lose a member. I want you to take a listen to what the UK Home Secretary said today about these rumors that the issue of security has been used as a bargaining chip.
There is absolutely no threat. There is only an observation that our fight against crime is strengthened by the arrangements we have with the European Union, and we need to put in place something to replace those.
Mm-hmm. So she's saying that the Prime Minister is not using security cooperation as a bargaining chip or even as a threat against the European Union. Well, what's she doing then?
Well, I think what they were trying to do is sweeten the bargain. They also suggested a trade agreement, and they suggested security cooperation. I don't think it was a threat either. I think it was trying to point out to the Europeans that there are some very fundamental things that they need to do with Europe, and that with Britain, rather, and that Britain is ready to do them.
Is Brexit going to be a positive or a negative for the EU when all is said and done?
I think they're working very hard to turn it into a negative. The European leaders, I think their strategy is about as bad as it could be. And I think the reason that their strategy is so bad is because they're worried that if the British are allowed to move peacefully into a different kind of status, one outside the center of the Union, that other countries may want the same thing. In other words, they're not sure of their own organization. But what they should be doing is trying to build up the very best relations they can with England, not punishing it.
So a soft Brexit instead of a hard Brexit.
That would be my view, because after all, the British are the second largest country in the EU. They're the second largest economy. They're the international finance center. They're the biggest defense contributor. Everything that Europe needs is helped provide by England or by Great Britain. And so what these people in Brussels are trying to do is somehow undermine that, and they're doing it, I think, because of their own insecurity.
John Kornblum, former U.S. ambassador to Germany. John, as always, we appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.